I'm at my mother-in-law's birthday party. If my mother dies, let me know later.
When the doctor repeated my son's words as she stood by my hospital bed, it felt as if the ceiling collapsed right on top of me. Not just the ceiling. My whole world, the one I had been building for 30 years, crashed down and buried the last crumbs of hope beneath it. The cold of the hospital room seeped into my bones. The metal stretcher beneath me felt icy, as if I were already lying in a morgue instead of the ICU. The smell of bleach mixed with something sharp and clinical that burned my throat and made me want to cough. But even coughing hurt. The 4 pulled at the vein in my left arm. The same arm that had kneaded dough by the 5-pound batch for 30 years, hauled cast iron pots filled with boiling broth, and never once knew what hand cream felt like. A stabbing pain shot through my hip, as if someone had driven a glowing nail into the bone and was slowly twisting it. Every breath sent heat pulsing through my chest. Every movement was torture. But you know what? The physical pain was nothing compared to what I heard from the lips of that young doctor with the tired face. Before I continue right where you're from, it's important for us to know how far our stories reach. Robert Higgins, my only son, the purpose of my life, the reason for every step I took and every sleepless night I had, decided that I was just a helpless old woman whose time was almost up. He decided that cake and champagne mattered more than his dying mother. He decided I was already dead. He was terribly wrong. When the doctor repeated his words, exactly as he said them without softening or mercy, the blood in my veins seemed to freeze. My hands, which had been trembling from fear and pain just a minute earlier, suddenly became still, motionless like stone. The fear of death that had been squeezing my throat and stealing my breath simply vanished. Something else replaced it. Absolute clarity. And then I remembered one tiny legal detail. So insignificant that my successful, educated, business-minded son never even thought about it. A detail that cost him everything he believed belonged to him. A detail that turned his greed into ashes. Before I tell you how I regained my dignity, make sure to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss any real stories like this one. What you're about to hear is a painful but necessary life lesson. A lesson every mother who has given her children everything, down to the last piece of her soul, must know. And I promise you, the ending of this story will shock you. It will make you rethink your relationships with the people closest to you. Stay with me until the last second because this story may open your eyes to how money can twist even your own blood. How it can turn a son into a stranger. How it can turn a mother into a burden. My name is Mrs. Martha Higgins. I'm 72 years old. My whole life, every single day without weekends or holidays, I worked in my little place Martha's Diner in the south side of Chicago. Some might say, a small diner, what's so special about that? But I'll tell you what, that diner became my life, my blood, my curse, and my salvation all at once. I thought my motherly sacrifices meant everything. That every sleepless night, every dollar I saved instead of buying myself new shoes, every drop of sweat over a hot stove, all of it filled some invisible jar of love. I thought my son would grow up and understand. That he would be grateful. That he would become the kind of decent man who would never leave his mother to die alone while he cut cake at someone else's celebration. I lay there on that icy stretcher under the harsh white glare of the hospital lamps, and decades flashed through my mind. Sleepless nights in the kitchen when my hands hurt so badly I wanted to cry. The wedding rings I sold. The only memory of my late husband, to pay for my son's future. The hands worn raw, covered in burns from hot oil and cuts from knives. The back that no longer straightens after 30 years at the stove. All of it for him. For Robbie, who right now at this very moment while I might die on an operating table, is cutting cake at his mother-in-law's party in Lake Geneva, laughing at someone else's jokes. A young nurse stood beside me, looking at me with that particular mix of pity and urgency that medical workers feel toward elderly patients who arrive alone. She saw just another abandoned old woman. No one came. No one held my hand. No one waited in the hallway. Just one more person who would die alone, and whose family would hear about it when it was too late. I thought my sacrifices meant something. That I had raised a good, decent man who was simply busy, simply building his career, simply living his life. But life taught me in the harshest, most merciless way that money can twist even your own blood. Turn a loving son into a calculating heir. Turn a mother's love into a business transaction. It all began on a regular evening, one that should have ended just like the thousands of evenings before it over the last 30 years. I pulled down the heavy metal shutter of my diner, and it closed with that familiar rattle I know by heart like my own breathing. That sound marked the end of yet another long workday here in the South Side, in my little world filled with the smell of frying meat and spices. At 72, my bones sometimes creak louder than the rusty hinges on my front door. My knees ache when I climb the steps. My lower back jolts with pain when I bend to the lower shelves. But I don't complain. I never have, and I'm not about to start now. I adjusted the warm blue shawl around my shoulders, the one I've worn for at least 10 years. It smells like dried peppers, cloves, cinnamon, and roasted meat. Funny how the scent of your work sinks into you, into your skin, hair, clothes, becoming a second skin. Even after washing, that shawl still smells like my diner. And you know what? That smell is my pride, not my shame. Because those smells, the frying, the roasting, the simmering, paid for my son's college tuition. They built the walls of my home brick by brick. They kept me standing from the day I became a widow when I was 42 and Robbie was 12. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. I buried my husband in October when the sky was gray and angry, and the rain hit so hard it made you want to scream. We had no money at all. Only debts from his illness and an empty wallet. And a child. A frightened little boy who clung to my skirt and kept asking when his father would come back. The day after the funeral, I got up at 4 in the morning. I took out my late mother-in-law's old recipe notebook, the one thing that saved us. I used the last of our money, bought ingredients, and started cooking. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes, stuffed peppers, beef stew, pies. Everything I knew how to make. I carried it all to a small stall at the market. For the first 2 weeks, no one bought anything. People walked by without even looking. I cried over the pot of stew, thinking it was all for nothing, that my son and I would starve. But then one factory worker came by. Huge man in a dirty uniform with a tired face. He bought a portion of meatloaf with mashed potatoes. Ate it right there standing. Came back an hour later with 3 friends. The next day there were 10 of them. A month later I rented a tiny space. That's how my diner began. For 30 years I stood at that stove. 30 years of waking up at 4 in the morning while the streets of Chicago were still drowned in darkness, the cold cutting straight through your bones. I kneaded dough until my hands stopped feeling pain simply out of habit. I chopped mountains of onions until tears became just a background noise. I fried batch after batch of meatloaf until my arms were covered in tiny burns from hot oil. But I never complained. I knew exactly why I did it. I did it for Robert. So his hands would never know the blisters of hard labor. So he'd touch only the pages of books, not bags of coal. So he'd wear white shirts instead of a uniform soaked in machine grease. So he'd become someone important. Someone his mother could be proud of. And he did become someone. Yes, he did. Successful, wealthy, important. So important that visits to see me in the South Side became rare. "It's dirty there, Mom," that's what he says. That evening, I walked slowly along the familiar sidewalk from the diner to my home. I felt the crisp autumn air of Chicago on my face. I was thinking about the weekend orders, mentally calculating how many pounds of meat I needed, which vegetables to order from old Mike at the market, how much dough to prepare the night before. My thoughts flowed in their usual rhythm. Ingredients, recipes, prices, everything as always. But then I heard that ringing in my ears again. Like an angry hive buzzing inside my skull, louder and louder, drowning out every other thought. Dr. Emily Carter, my primary care doctor, had already scolded me last week when I came in for a refill on my blood pressure meds. I remember sitting in her office on a hard chair, listening to the monotonous ticking of the wall clock, feeling my palms grow sweaty with worry. She looked at me over her glasses. That particular look doctors give stubborn patients who are digging their own graves by ignoring their health. My chart lay on the desk in front of her. My blood pressure numbers were underlined in red. Twice. "Mrs. Higgins, this kind of blood pressure is a ticking time bomb," she said sternly, tapping her pen against the desk. Do you understand? Not just high. Critically dangerous. You need to rest. Do you hear me? Rest. Not stand over a stove for 12 hours. Leave the work, hire help for heaven's sake. I nodded then, took the prescription with trembling fingers, and walked out of her office knowing full well that nothing would change. How could I leave the diner? Who would make sure the meatloaf stayed juicy and the stew rich and hearty? Who would remember that Mr. Peterson from the garage doesn't eat onions after his heart attack? Who would know that Sam the electrician always asks for extra cabbage because his wife is on a diet? Who would remember that Mrs. Gable likes her potatoes soft, and Nick the welder likes them crispy? This is my diner. My customers. My life. The only thing I have left. I'm from the kind of place, back in Illinois in neighborhoods like the South Side, where we don't fall apart over a little dizziness. We're the ones who worked through the 90s when paychecks didn't come for months. We're the ones who lived through war. Yes, as children, but we lived through it. We don't complain. We endure. That's what I told myself every time the ringing got louder and the black spots blurred my vision. I told myself the same that evening. Just fatigue. Nothing deadly. I'd get home, drink herbal tea with mint and lemon balm, the one Dorothy gathers at her garden, and everything would pass. I just needed to get home. 3 blocks. 15 minutes of walking. But the ringing grew louder. Sharper. And something inside me, a deep ancient survival instinct, screamed, stop, sit, call someone. But I didn't stop. I'm one of those who got used to enduring, who learned not to listen to pain because otherwise working would have been impossible. I walked and wondered why I couldn't stop, why I couldn't take a day off, why I couldn't hire help even though Betty at the market had offered her niece 3 times. And it wasn't even about money. Money wasn't the issue. It was that if I stopped, if I admitted I couldn't do it anymore, then who would I be? Just an old woman sitting at home watching TV waiting to die? No. Work is the only thing that keeps me in this world. It's proof that I'm still alive, still needed by someone, still capable of creating something. That I'm not just existing, I'm living. Maybe if Robert visited more often. If he called not only when he needed money. If at least once, just once, he asked, Mom, how's your health? How's your blood pressure? Maybe then I'd allow myself to rest. Maybe then I wouldn't cling to that diner like a drowning person to a straw. But when you're 72, when your husband has long been buried under a gray headstone, when your only son sees you as a burden and is ashamed of the smell of fried food on your clothes, work is all you have. The only thing that cannot leave you, cannot betray you, cannot say, sorry Mom, I'm busy. The street seemed too narrow. The streetlights became brighter, harsher. The sound of cars grew distant, as if someone had covered the city with a thick blanket. I felt my heart beating wrong, too fast, too hard, as if it wanted to break out of my chest. Cold sweat gathered on my forehead. My palms turned damp. The bag in my hand suddenly felt heavy, as if I were carrying a bag of cement instead of a worn leather purse. I saw it then. A crow. It was perched on the edge of a trash bin, staring at me with black, unblinking eyes. Just staring. And something in that look felt knowing. As if the bird saw what I couldn't. As if it knew what would happen a minute from now. I looked away and quickened my pace. Nonsense. Superstition. I don't believe in signs. But my heart pounded harder and the ringing in my ears turned into a roar. The roar of an ocean. The roar of a storm closing in. I tried to cross the street. The asphalt beneath my feet suddenly turned into water. Thick, black water that didn't hold me but dragged me down. My legs buckled. Not gradually, suddenly, as if someone pulled the ground out from under me. 1 second I was still standing, the next I was falling into a void. Car headlights stretched into neon ribbons. Red brake lights, yellow turn signals, white beams. All the colors smeared across my vision, flowing, turning into glowing snakes crawling toward me, twisting, hissing silently. Time slowed down. Or sped up. I couldn't tell. Every fraction of a second felt like a lifetime, but somehow everything happened instantly. The noise of the street began to fade. As if someone picked up a remote and started turning down the volume of the world. First the voices faded, The people at the bus stop shouting to each other, laughing at some joke. Then the hum of cars, which in Chicago never stops even at night, melted into a faraway buzz, like a sound trapped inside a seashell. Then it disappeared entirely. All that remained was the ringing in my ears and the pounding of my heart, wild, uneven, desperate, as if it were trying to break out of my chest. I was falling. Slowly. So slowly that I had time to think, this is it. This is how it happens. I reached out my hand, instinctively trying to grab onto something. Anything. A pole, a wall, a stranger's arm. Something solid and real to stop the fall. But my fingers found only air. Cold autumn air that could not hold me. And in that moment, when my body was collapsing, when my consciousness flickered like a candle blown by the wind, my brain did something strange. It pulled out a single image from the vast archive of my memory. One memory. The brightest, the most alive. Robbie. 5 years old. Maybe 6. Summer. A hot July day. The courtyard of our old building in the South Side before it was ever repaired. He was running toward me across the yard, tripping but still running. His knees were scraped and bleeding. He'd fallen again playing soccer with older boys. His face was wet with tears, flushed from the heat and crying. His nose runny. His lips trembling. He ran straight into me, nearly knocking me over, wrapped his arms around my legs, the only place he could reach, and cried out through sobs, "Mom. Mommy, it hurts." I picked him up. Back then it was so easy, he was so small, so light. I kissed the top of his head, damp from tears. I remembered the smell of his hair, sweet, warm, a little salty from sweat, a smell you never forget even 50 years later. I carried him home, his face buried in my shoulder, still sobbing. I stroked his thin little back, every vertebra sharp under my hand, and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mom is here. Mom is with you. Mom will always be here. Always, you hear me? Always. Always." Such a simple word. Such a dishonest word. My knees hit the asphalt first. Pain exploded, sharp, slicing, overwhelming enough to drown out the ringing. The skin tore and I felt warm blood run down my leg. Then my elbow hit. Then my hip, the same hip that would crack so badly it would require surgery. Then my side. My body folded and broke like an old discarded doll. My bag flew out of my hand, its contents scattering across the pavement with a sad clatter. A worn wallet with some change, keys to my home and Martha's Diner, my phone in an old case, and a small medallion of the Virgin Mary, the first always carried with me. Everything rolled in different directions, like the shattered pieces of a broken life. Somewhere in the distance people screamed. Someone was running. I heard footsteps slapping against the pavement. I heard fragments of frightened voices. "That lady fell. Call an ambulance. Don't move her." But their voices sounded as if they were coming from underwater. Muffled. Unreal. Far away. My cheek touched the cold asphalt. Rough, dirty, smelling of dust, gasoline, and autumn. I lay there, staring at blurred silhouettes bending over me, blocking out the sky. Someone took off their jacket and covered me with it, warm, smelling of tobacco. A pair of hands, strangers' hands but warm, alive, gently touched my shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me? The ambulance is on its way. Hold on." I tried to nod but couldn't. My tongue wouldn't obey. The last thing I thought before everything went black wasn't the pressure cooker on the stove at the diner, though that was the first thought that flashed by. Had I closed it? Turned off the gas? Strange, isn't it? You're dying on the street and your mind goes to trivial things instead of replaying your whole life. No, not just the pressure cooker. I was lying to myself. I thought of Robert. That someone would call him. Some doctor, some nurse. They'd say, "Your mother is in the hospital. You need to come right away." And what would he say? Drop everything and rush over? Or say what he eventually said? "I'm at a meeting. I'm at a birthday. I'm busy. Let me know later." Darkness closed over me, thick and heavy like a soaked wool blanket. One last feeling, more than a thought, stabbed what was left of my consciousness. I'm dying alone. Completely alone. On cold asphalt. Surrounded by strangers. And my son, my only son, the one I gave my whole life to, won't even know about it until tomorrow. Maybe the day after. And then nothing. Absolute darkness. Icy cold. Endless emptiness. When I woke up, the first thing I felt was cold. Not the cold of the night outside, not the cold of the autumn wind. A clinical metallic cold. The cold of a hospital. A cold that smelled like death and disinfectant. I opened my eyes. The white light hit so sharply it felt like someone stuck needles into my pupils. I squeezed my eyes shut, groaned. My mouth was dry like sandpaper. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. And all I tasted was blood and something bitter medical. I lay on the stretcher. Metal, narrow, uncomfortable. The 4 was attached to my arm. My left arm, the same one that used to haul 50-pound bags of flour and giant pots of boiling broth. Now that arm felt foreign. Fragile. Covered with age spots and bulging blue veins under the bright, unforgiving hospital lights. My hip. God, my hip. The pain was sharp, piercing, so strong it stole my breath. Every inhale sent fire through my bones. I tried to move my leg. Couldn't. The pain only intensified, becoming unbearable. A young nurse approached when she heard me groan. She had a round, childlike face and light hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She looked at me with that particular mix of pity and professional urgency medical workers have for elderly patients who come into the ER alone. "You're awake," she said, not a question, a statement. "How are you feeling?" I tried to answer, but only a rasp came out. "Don't speak yet," she said, filling a plastic cup with water and lifting it to my lips. "Drink." Small sips. The water was warm, tasteless, but I drank it greedily, like someone who had crossed a desert. "You collapsed in the street," the nurse explained as she checked the 4. "A passerby called the ambulance. Your blood pressure was critical, 200 over 130. Do you understand how dangerous that is? And your femur. There's a crack, possibly a fracture. You need surgery, but we have to stabilize your pressure first." Surgery. The word hung in the air, heavy, frightening. "You need to sign consent forms. And," she hesitated, "we need to contact your relatives. Do you have anyone? Children? A husband?" A question I feared more than the scalpel. More than dying on an operating table. "A son," I rasped. "I have a son." "Good," she brightened. "We checked your bag, found your documents, but your phone is locked. Tell me the passcode and we'll call him." I felt a hollow space open in my stomach. Not hunger. Emptiness. Fear. The kind I hadn't felt even in the hungry years after my husband died. Slowly, with trembling lips, I recited the code. Robert's birthday. Not mine. His. Always his date. His birthday for every lock, every code. As if I were afraid I might forget the day my son was born. The nurse unlocked the phone, scrolled through the contacts, found son. She tapped it and handed the phone to me. "You call. It'll be easier for him not to panic." I took the phone with shaking fingers. The screen glowed in the dim room. Robert's name on the display. His photo, he's in an expensive suit, smiling at some corporate event. Successful. Handsome. A stranger. The dial tone. First ring. My pulse quickened. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst. Third. Each ring hit my chest like a hammer. I remembered that day. He was 5. Burning with fever. I sat beside him for 3 nights straight, never leaving his side. Changed cold compresses, gave him water, whispered prayers. On the 3rd night the fever broke. He opened his eyes, cupped my face with his small, hot hands and said, looking straight at me, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll always be with you. Always okay? I'll never leave you alone. I promise." 4th ring. 5th. The nurse stood beside me and suddenly I felt ashamed. I wanted to excuse him to her. To say, "He's an important man, he's at an important meeting, he works a lot, he loves me, he's just busy. I'm not alone. I have a son." But I said nothing. I closed my eyes. Whispered a prayer to the small medallion of the Virgin Mary, the first always kept in my pocket. Not asking for the pain to stop, asking for him to answer. To not make me feel like a burden. A nuisance. A mistake. 6th ring. 7th. The phone kept ringing, and in that drawn-out sound, the loneliness felt colder than the entire hospital room. I heard the hum of my past. As if I slipped back 30 years. The hospital smell faded. I could smell burning firewood and raw yeast dough again. 4 in the morning. Winter. The streets of Chicago still drowned in darkness. Cold so sharp your hands go numb even inside mittens. I'm standing at a market stall setting out pots of hot food. Steam rises from the beef stew. My hands are red, chapped, covered in tiny cuts and burns. My back aches so badly I want to sit and never get up. But I can't. I need to sell. I need to earn for Robbie. For his school. For food. For life. I looked at my hands on the white hospital sheet. No. In this moment. Deformed. Fingers twisted by arthritis. Skin marked with age spots. Veins thick and blue. Nails yellow and brittle. Scars everywhere, each one a story. This one from a knife that slipped while cutting meat. This one from hot oil that splashed while frying meatloaf. And these knobby joints, from cold, damp winters and 30 years of non-stop work. But back then, 30 years ago, my hands were strong. Young. Capable of anything. They kneaded 20-pound batches of dough in one night. They chopped meat, peeled vegetables, washed mountains of dishes in icy water because there was no hot water. I thought about it often, lying awake at night. My hands burned out so his hands could touch only books. Only pens, keyboards, documents. So they would stay soft. Well kept. Clean. I never wanted Robert to know what it was like, having blisters that split open and bleed. Carrying a sack of coal in freezing winter temperatures. Standing over a hot stove for 12 hours until your legs swell and stop bending at the knees. I wanted his hands to stay clean. I wanted him to sign important documents, shake hands with respectable, successful people. I wanted him to become someone. A flash of memory. Bright, sharp like an electric shock. The day he came home with that letter. 14 years old, tall, skinny, trembling with excitement. Waving a white envelope. Mom, I got in. To the university. The best one in the city. He was ecstatic. His eyes shining. He jumped, laughed, hugged me. And I felt the ground crumble beneath me. Because inside that envelope was a number. A huge, impossible number. The enrollment fee. The first semester. The textbooks. I didn't have enough even for the enrollment fee, let alone the rest. I smiled at him. Said, "Good job, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Hugged him. And all the while I was thinking, where do I get the money? How? From where? That night when he fell asleep I took out a small box. Wooden, worn old. Inside it were the only valuables left from his father. The wedding rings. 2 gold rings. Mine and his. Heavy. The kind they don't make anymore. I sat in the kitchen until morning holding the rings in my hands. Turning them over, looking at the engraving inside. Our names and the date of our wedding. I cried silently so Robbie wouldn't hear. The next day I went to a pawn shop. Dirty, fogged windows, a grumpy appraiser behind the glass. I placed the rings on the scratched counter. Sold them without bargaining. I took the money and felt a part of my life, a part of my soul, disappear along with those rings. As if I had betrayed my husband's memory. As if I had sold our love for pieces of paper. When I handed Robert the money, I told him it was savings from Martha's Diner. That I had been putting it aside just in case. He believed me. Hugged me, kissed my cheek, said, "Thanks, Mom. You're the best." He never found out that I sold my past to buy him a future. And it worked. He graduated with honors. Became an important man. Successful. Wealthy. But the success I bought for him at the cost of those rings, the cost of my hands, the cost of my life, became the very thing that took him away from me forever. I remembered the day he first brought her home. Tiffany. Tall, slim, wearing an expensive coat and heels that clicked loudly down the hallway. She walked into my tiny apartment, glanced around at the old furniture, the faded wallpaper, the worn rug. The first thing she did was pull a wet wipe from her purse and clean the chair before sitting down. Slowly. Deliberately. As if she were afraid of catching something from my old furniture. "Mom, this is Tiffany," Robert said, excited, happy in love. "We've been dating for 6 months." I smiled and held out my hand. She shook it with the tips of her fingers, quick as if touching something unpleasant. I set the table. Everything I could cook best. Homemade pies, meatloaf, beef stew, salads. I tried my hardest. I wanted her to see, I am a good hostess, a caring mother. Tiffany poked at her plate with a fork. Took a tiny bite of pie, chewed with an expression like she was swallowing medicine. It's good, she said unconvincingly. But I'm on a diet. Sorry. Then when Robert stepped out to the bathroom, she turned to me and said quietly but clearly, enunciating every word. You know, Mrs. Higgins, that smell, she wrinkled her nose. It gets into clothes. My hair. I smell like fried food all day afterward. My coworkers at the salon even ask where I had lunch. It's unpleasant, you understand? I work in a respectable place. We're not supposed to smell like, she paused, searching for the word, a cafeteria. I sat frozen. Something in my chest tightened, sharp, painful. But I smiled. I nodded. I understand. I'm sorry. Sorry. I apologized for 30 years of honest work. For the smell that was my life, my sacrifice, my love for my son. After that, their visits became fewer. First they came every Sunday. Then every 2 weeks. Then once a month. Then only on holidays. And then even holidays started happening at her parents' house. Mom, you understand, Robert would say on the phone. Tiffany's mom is upset we don't visit enough. Let's do this New Year's at her place and next year we'll be with you, okay? I spent the next New Year alone. With the TV and a bowl of potato salad no one came to eat. I didn't hold it against him. I understood. Robert was building a family, a career, a life. He had his priorities. I was just a mother. Old. Smelling of fried food. Inconvenient. But he called. Not often, but he did. Though always with the same line. Hey Mom. Listen, I've got a situation. And then came the request. He needed money. He always needed money. The first time it was for a car. He had found a great deal but was short on the amount. Mom, it's an investment in the future, you get it? I need it for work. I drive clients. I can't take a bus, right? I gave it to him. I broke my savings. Literally broke a ceramic piggy bank where I had been putting away dollars for years. The second time it was a trip to Europe. Tiffany dreamed of Italy and the tour was expensive. Mom, we're both so exhausted. We need to rest, to reset. Tiffany is on the edge of a nervous breakdown. You don't want us to have problems in our marriage, right? I didn't. Of course I didn't. I gave them everything I had saved to repair the roof at Martha's Diner. The roof could wait. The third time, it was a down payment on a summer house. Tiffany needed a place to relax in the warm months. The city apartment depressed her. Mom, we have almost everything we need. We're just short a little for the down payment. Please help us. I helped. I took out a second mortgage on the diner. At 70 years old, I went into debt so my son could buy a vacation house for a wife who thought I smelled unpleasant. Every time I said yes, I bought myself an illusion. An illusion that I mattered. That I was needed. That I wasn't just an old woman they wanted to push aside, but a mother who could help, support, give. Every time I handed over money, I thought, maybe now he'll visit more often. Maybe he'll thank me not just with words but with actions. Maybe he'll ask how I'm feeling, whether it's hard for me, whether I need help. But he never asked. He took the money, said thanks, disappeared. Until the next time he needed something. I lay on the hospital stretcher and a single tear slid slowly down my temple onto the pillow. Warm, salty, bitter. The phone kept ringing and I realized he wasn't going to answer. Not now. Maybe not at all. 8th ring. Ninth. I remembered the last time he visited. 2 months ago. No, 3. Or maybe 4. Time had blurred into something shapeless. Days blended into one endless day. I woke up, went to Martha's Diner, worked, came home, went to sleep. And again. He came in the evening without calling. Just knocked on the door. I was so happy it felt like Christmas. I hugged him, started setting the table. No need, Mom, he stopped me. I can't stay long. I need to talk. We sat in the kitchen. He rolled his phone in his hands, avoiding my eyes. Listen, we've got a situation. Tiffany's parents want to help us with housing. Buy a bigger apartment, 3 bedrooms in a new building. But we need to contribute. They're covering most of it, but we need to find the rest. I know it's a lot, but almost half of everything I had in my account. All the savings from recent years. Mom, come on, this is for us. For your grandchild. I had no grandchild. Tiffany didn't want children. She said her career mattered more, that kids were a burden, that modern women didn't have to be mothers. Robert agreed with her on everything. But he said, for your grandchild. And I bought the lie. All right, I said. I'll give it to you. He hugged me. Kissed my cheek. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. I love you. Words I wanted to hear so badly. But they sounded like payment. Like a receipt for money received. He left 10 minutes later. Said he was in a hurry, that Tiffany was waiting in the car downstairs. He didn't even drink tea. After that, he didn't call for a month and a half. When I called him, he answered on the 5th ring, his voice irritated. Mom, I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. He didn't. That was when I understood, lying alone in my empty apartment, staring at the ceiling, that I wasn't buying his love. I was buying the right not to be completely forgotten. The right to rare calls. The right to short visits. The right to exist somewhere on the edge of his life. 10th ring. I pressed the red button. Set the phone on my chest. Closed my eyes. The nurse stood beside me. Silent. She had probably seen this 100 times. Old people abandoned by their children. It wasn't new. It was sad statistics. He didn't pick up? She asked softly. I shook my head. He's busy probably. He'll call back. We both knew it was a lie. But she didn't argue. She just adjusted the 4 and left. I lay in the silence. Listened to the distant groans of someone in pain, the squeak of stretchers, the shuffle of medical shoes across linoleum. I remembered how 5-year-old Robbie had promised, I'll never leave you. How he cried through the nights with fever while I held his hand and whispered, Mom is here. Always here. He grew up. Became an adult, successful, wealthy. But he forgot his promise. Or didn't take it seriously. Children say many things. Promise everything. And then grow up and forget. Another tear slid down my temple. I didn't wipe it away. I just lay there and felt it leave a damp trail across my skin. The phone on my chest suddenly vibrated. The screen lit up. A message. I lifted the phone with trembling hands. Read it. Mom, sorry I was busy. What's going on? Not, how are you? Not, are you okay? Just, what happened? Businesslike. Quick. As if I were a coworker needing a report. The nurse came back with some papers. Mrs. Higgins, you need to call him again. Explain the situation. Tell him about the surgery. He should come and sign the documents as your closest relative. I looked at the phone. At his message. At the 3 dots on the screen, he was typing something else. I'm at my mother-in-law's birthday in Lake Geneva. If it's something serious, text me. I'll call later. Okay. The words froze on the screen. Each letter, like a blow. I reread it once. Twice. 3 times. I'm at my mother-in-law's birthday. If it's something serious, text me. I'll call later. Not now. Later. After the party. After they cut the cake. After they drink the champagne. After his mother stops being more important than celebrating with his wife's family. When the screen went dark, something inside me clicked. Didn't break. Didn't shatter. It clicked. Like a switch. Like a lock snapping shut and never opening again. I lay there motionless, staring at the white hospital ceiling, feeling a strange emptiness. Not pain. Not anger. Emptiness. As if something inside me had burned out completely, leaving only ashes. The door opened. A man in his 50s walked in wearing a white coat. Tall, graying, with a tired but kind face. He came up to my stretcher and studied me closely. Mrs. Higgins, he said quietly, I'm Dr. Alan Turner, the trauma surgeon. I'll be operating on you. I recognized him. Not immediately, but I did. He used to be a customer at Martha's Diner. Many years ago. 15 maybe. He came regularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always ordered beef stew and meatloaf. Always asked for extra meat. Always left good tips and thanked me so sincerely that I remembered people like him. I remember you, I rasped. You liked stew with sour cream. He smiled, surprised. You really remember? God, that was so long ago. I worked at the clinic near your diner back then. I had lunch at your place every day. Best stew in the city. But the smile faded quickly. He pulled up a chair and sat beside me. Something heavy was in his eyes. Something he didn't want to say but had to. Mrs. Higgins, he leaned closer, I have to be honest with you. I can't send you into surgery with a lie. It wouldn't be right. My heart jerked. I braced myself to hear the worst, that the surgery was dangerous, that I might not wake up. But he said something else. The nurse called your son. Not you, him. When you were unconscious. She explained the situation, that you were in the hospital, that you needed urgent surgery, that your condition was serious. She asked if he could come. He paused, looked at me, waited. And what did he say? My voice was barely audible. Dr. Turner sighed. Heavily. Rubbed his face. He said, the doctor spoke slowly, enunciating every word. I'm in Lake Geneva at my mother-in-law's birthday. If my mother dies, let me know later. Time stopped. I heard every word. Every syllable. Every letter. They branded themselves into my mind like hot iron. I'm in Lake Geneva. At my mother-in-law's birthday. If my mother dies, let me know later. Not, I'm on my way right now. Not, hold on Mom, I'll be there in an hour. Not, do everything you can, I'll pay for it. If my mother dies, let me know later. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't fall into hysterics. I just lay there staring at the ceiling. My hands, which had been trembling only a minute earlier, suddenly became perfectly still. Motionless. The doctor leaned closer. I'm very sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. But you needed the truth. Before surgery, a person deserves the truth. I turned my head and looked at him. At this stranger who had eaten my stew 15 years ago and now sat beside me, holding my hand and showing more compassion than my own son ever had. Thank you, I said. Thank you for telling me. He nodded. Stayed silent. Then after a moment he asked, Mrs. Higgins, do you know who owns the land under the business center on Michigan Avenue? The one with the offices, where your son works. I looked at him confused. To whom? Some company, I suppose. No, he shook his head. There's a building there. Your son uses it for his office. But does he know whose name the property is registered under? Who the actual owner is? I said nothing. My mind worked slowly, heavily, as if through cotton. And then it came to me. The building. The commercial building on Michigan Avenue. I had bought it 20 years ago when the diner finally began bringing in good money. Bought it in my own name. Robert was in his 20s then, just starting his career. I gave him the right to use the office space. For free. I told him, use it, sweetheart. It's yours. Everything of mine is yours. But the documents stayed under my name. Mrs. Martha Higgins, owner. The doctor saw that I understood. He gently squeezed my hand. You need to sign documents before the surgery. Consent for the operation is mandatory. But there are other documents you may sign if you want to. If you feel it's necessary. He stood, walked to the door, paused. I'll send in the notary. We have one on duty at the hospital for situations like this. You can formalize anything you consider right. Before surgery. So that later, there are no regrets. Either way. The door closed behind him. I lay alone. In silence. In the cold hospital room. I remembered little Robbie, promising he'd always be by my side. I remembered the wedding rings I sold. I remembered the piggy bank I shattered. I remembered the second mortgage I took on Martha's diner. I remembered every mom help, every mom give, every mom you understand. I remembered Tiffany wiping the chair with a wet wipe. I remembered her comment about the cafeteria smell. I remembered lonely New Year's Eves with the TV. And I remembered the words the doctor had just spoken. If my mother dies, let me know later. Something inside me finally broke. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Out of something else. A sense of self-respect I had buried for years under layers of maternal love and sacrifice. I don't want to die a doormat. A rag people wipe their feet on. I want to die a person. A woman who deserves respect. Even if the price is my son hating me. Reality didn't hit me to destroy me. It hit me to give me strength. In that moment, lying on the cold hospital stretcher with an 4 in my arm and pain burning in my broken hip, I suddenly felt stronger than I had in 10 years. Robert was somewhere in Lake Geneva now. Probably sitting at a festive table. Smiling. Raising a glass to his mother-in-law's health. Cutting birthday cake. Laughing at someone's jokes. Holding Tiffany close. And his mother lay in a hospital bed, possibly dying on the operating table. And he didn't care. At all. He wasn't even planning to come. Not now. Later. When the party ended. When the cake was cut. When the champagne was finished. I pictured him walking through his office. A big, bright office in that business center on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. Expensive furniture. Large windows. A view of the city. A secretary bringing coffee. Clients greeting him with respect. Successful. Important. Wealthy. But he had forgotten one small detail. He forgot that the building wasn't his. That the ownership documents weren't in his name. That the owner was his mother, Mrs. Martha Higgins, a 72-year-old woman who bought that building with money earned through 30 years at a hot stove. He used the office for free because I let him. Because I said, "Take it, sweetheart. It's yours. Everything of mine is yours." But legally, formally, by law, it's mine. And only mine. The door opened. A woman in her 40s walked in with a case. Strict suit, hair pulled back, a tired professional expression. "Mrs. Higgins? I'm Mrs. Emily Carter, the notary. Dr. Turner requested me. He said you need to prepare some documents." The same name, Emily Carter. Not the doctor but the notary. A coincidence. I would have smiled if I could. She pulled up a chair, opened her case, took out papers and a laptop. "So, what exactly would you like to prepare?" "A will." "No," I shook my head. "Not a will. A revocation of the right to use the property." She raised her eyebrows. "Please explain." I explained. Briefly. Hurry. About the building. About how Robert used it for free with my permission. About how I wanted to withdraw that permission. Immediately. Starting today. And, I paused, I want to transfer the building as a donation. To a charity. Any charity that helps elderly people who are alone. The notary looked at me silently. Then nodded. "I understand. This is your right. You're competent, conscious, and aware of the consequences of your decisions. I can prepare the documents. But, are you sure? This is your son." "Yes," I said firmly. "He is my son. And that is exactly why I am sure." She silently opened her laptop and began typing. While she worked, I thought. Not about Robert. About myself. About who I had been all these years. Convenient. Compliant. Forgiving. Giving endlessly and expecting nothing in return. Thought it was love. That a mother's love meant sacrifice. Giving everything. Asking for nothing. Enduring. Forgiving. Handing over money when asked. Staying quiet when hurt. Smiling when ignored. But I had been wrong. That is not love. That is self-destruction. Real love requires respect. Reciprocity. And all I ever received were invoices. Emotional invoices. "Mom, give. Mom, help. Mom, you understand. Enough. If I die today on the operating table, I will die with my head held high. Not a doormat. Not an ATM. A person who had the courage to say no even to her own child. And if I survive, well, then Robert will learn that his mother is not a helpless old woman. That this old woman has teeth. And she knows how to show them." The notary turned the laptop toward me. "Here's the document. Read it carefully. If you agree, sign here, here, and here." I read it. Every line. Every word. Revoking the right of free use of the premises. Transferring the property as a gift to the charity Mercy. Effective today. I picked up the pen. My hand didn't tremble. Not at all. Steadily, clearly, I wrote my name, Mrs. Martha Higgins. 3 signatures. 3 times I signed away what my only son believed belonged to him. The notary stamped the documents and placed them in her case. That's all. Legally, the document takes effect immediately. Your son loses the right to use the property. The building will be transferred to the foundation within 10 days. She stood, extended her hand. I wish you a successful surgery. And, she hesitated, I don't know what happened between you two. But I see many people. Many families. And you know what? Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop letting them take advantage of your kindness. She left. I remained alone. 3 days passed. 3 long days between sleep and waking, between pain and relief, between past and future. The surgery went well. My hip was stabilized with a metal structure. The doctor said that for my age I was recovering surprisingly well. My blood pressure had stabilized. The pain had become manageable. But most importantly, I was alive. Despite everything. Despite the fact that my son was ready to hear of my death later. I lay in my room looking out at the gray autumn sky over Chicago, thinking, life is strange. Sometimes you have to come close to death to begin living for real. The door burst open. Loud. Robert walked in. I would recognize his walk from a mile away. Quick, confident, slightly anxious. He always walked that way when he was excited or irritated. He stopped by my bed. In his hands, a cheap bouquet of carnations. Red carnations bought by the look of them at a street corner. Wrinkled wrapping, flimsy plastic. The kind of flowers people buy at the last minute to create the appearance of caring. He wore an expensive suit. The same one I had seen in the photo on my phone. The scent of his cologne, the one I had given him last winter for his birthday, mixed with the hospital's disinfectant and medicine. Mom, he said, reaching out to hug me. Mom, how are you? God, I was so worried. As soon as I heard, I came right away. I didn't reach out. I simply lay there looking at him. Cold, as if he were a stranger. He froze. His arms hung awkwardly in the air like those of a mannequin dressed in an expensive suit. His face shifted from confusion to concern. Mom, do you hear me? I hear you, I said evenly. Perfectly well, Robert. He sat on the chair next to the bed and placed the carnations on the table. Leaned closer, took my hand. I didn't pull away. I simply didn't respond. My hand lay in his palm lifelessly like an object. Mom, I was so scared when they told me. The connection was bad. I didn't understand right away what happened. I wanted to come immediately, but you were at your mother-in-law's birthday in Lake Geneva, I finished for him. And you decided that if I died they could tell you later. He went pale. His face turned waxy. His Adam's apple jerked. He swallowed hard. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a nervous, brittle sound like cracking glass. Who told you that? Mom, that's not true. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't mean it that way. They misheard. Robert, I stopped him with a raised hand. The gesture was firm like a concrete wall. Enough. I heard your words. Word for word. From the doctor who operated on me. From someone who heard them from the nurse. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened again. Searching for excuses. For words. For a way to wiggle out the way he always had. Mom, try to understand. I was stressed. I thought it wasn't serious. I didn't know. How was the cake in Lake Geneva? I asked suddenly, looking straight into his eyes. He froze. Didn't understand the question. What? The cake, I repeated slowly. Your mother-in-law's birthday. The cake. Was it good? Pretty? With frosting? Chocolate? Fruit? Tell me about the cake, Robert. The same cake that mattered more than your dying mother. His face twisted. He understood. Understood that I knew. That the game was over. That apologies and excuses no longer worked. Mom, that slice of cake cost you your inheritance, Robert. I reached toward the bedside table and took an envelope. White, official, stamped by the notary. I laid it on the blanket between us. He looked at the envelope. Reached for it. Opened it with trembling fingers. Read it. Quickly at first, then slower. Then again. His lips moved silently. His eyes darted across the lines. I watched his face change. Confusion. Disbelief. Bigger. What is this? His voice shook. Revocation of use? Donation to a charity? Mom, you can't be serious. That's my office. My building. I work there. Everything I have is there. It isn't your office, I said calmly. It's my building. The one I bought with money earned through 30 years of work. I allowed you to use it for free. Now I'm taking that right back. But why? Because of one sentence? Mom, that's unfair. Unfair. He was talking to me about fairness. Unfair. I pushed myself upright despite the pain. Do you know what's unfair, Robert? Selling my wedding rings after my husband died so I could pay for your education. That's unfair. Working 12 hours a day at 70 so you could buy a vacation house for a wife who despises me. That's unfair. Spending New Year's Eve alone because you decided the smell of my diner ruined Tiffany's clothes. That's unfair. My voice rose. I didn't shout, but every word landed like a blow. Dying alone on the street. Lying in a hospital bed calling a son who doesn't pick up because he's cutting cake. Hearing from a doctor that my only child said, "If my mother dies, let me know later." That, Robert, is unfair. He sat there pale, papers trembling in his hands. He tried to speak, but the words jammed in his throat. "This is all because of Tiffany, right?" he finally forced out. "You don't like her, you're trying to turn us against each other. Take your cheap flowers," I said coldly, "and leave. I'm alive. You can inform whoever may be interested. The surgery went well. You're free. Go back to your life where there's no place for an old woman who smells like a diner." Mom. Leave, Robert. He stood. Took the carnations. Stood there lost, not knowing what to do. Then he turned and walked to the door. Stopped at the threshold. "You'll regret this." "No," I answered. "I won't. For the first time in many years, I won't regret my decision." The door closed. I was discharged a week after the surgery. Robert didn't come. I didn't expect him to. Didn't call him. It was my friend Dorothy who came for me. 75 years old, gray-haired but strong, a woman who'd lived nearby all her life, who brought me herbal tea when I was sick, who sat with me when my husband died, who never asked for anything in return. He helped me get to the taxi, held my arm as I walked slowly down the hospital hallway with my walker. In her other hand she carried a bag, my things, the dirty clothes I'd been brought in, my blue shawl, now smelling of hospital corridors in the past. "You know, Dorothy," I said when we sat in the car, "there's a saying, when you stop being the doormat people wipe their feet on, you become the wall their ambitions crash against." He squeezed my hand. "You did the right thing." Home was quiet. Empty. But it was a good emptiness. Not loneliness. Peace. I sat down in my old armchair by the window. The same one where I had spent years watching the street, waiting for Robert to come. Any minute now, I used to think. Any minute. Dorothy made tea. Brought some cookies. Sat beside me. "Has he come by since you were discharged?" "No." "Called?" "No." We sat quietly. Drank tea. Looked out the window at the autumn streets of Chicago. "I heard from Mrs. Henderson in the 7th building," Dorothy said cautiously. "There was a scene at that place. Your building. People from the foundation came, said they were the new owners. Robert shouted, demanded explanations. Said you'd lost your mind, that he'd challenged the documents." "Let him try," I shrugged. "The documents were notarized. I was fully competent. There were witnesses. The doctors will confirm it." "Did they evict him?" "They gave him a month to vacate. After that, it'll be rented out. The money will go to the foundation. To help elderly people who are alone." Dorothy nodded and poured more tea. "And you don't regret it?" I looked at her. Honestly thought. You know, my heart aches. Of course it does. He's my son. I gave birth to him. Raised him. Loved him. Still love him probably. But, I paused, searching for the right words. But being unappreciated hurts more. When you're treated like an ATM, like a convenient source of money and favors, not like a person. When your sacrifices are taken for granted. When some other woman's birthday matters more than your life. That's the kind of pain that cuts deepest. I stood up. Walked to the shelf where the photographs stood. Picked one up. Robert in a graduation gown, holding his diploma on the day he finished university. Happy. Young. Grateful. I turned the photo face down and set it back. I took back what I earned over 40 years. It's mine. I have the right to do with it what I choose. Not out of revenge. Out of fairness. For myself. Dorothy hugged me. We stood in the middle of my little apartment, two elderly women who had lived through a lot, lost a lot, but not lost themselves. That evening, after Dorothy left, I lit a candle before the small medallion of the Virgin Mary that had always hung in the corner. I knelt as much as my healing hip allowed and prayed. Not for Robert to return. Not for him to repent or ask forgiveness. I prayed for strength. For strength to go on without expecting anything from him. For strength to accept that a mother's love is not always returned. For strength to be grateful for what I have instead of mourning what I don't. 6 months passed. My hip healed. I walk with a cane now, but I walk. I sold Martha's Diner. I'm too old to stand by a stove for 12 hours a day. Put the money in the bank. I live modestly but with dignity. The building is rented out. The money goes to the Mercy Foundation. Every month I get reports. How many seniors were helped, whose medication was paid for, who received a wheelchair, who got a caregiver. My building, the one Robert believed was his, now saves lives. Real lives. Not ambitions. Not vanity. Lives. No news from Robert. He doesn't call. Doesn't write. Doesn't show up. I heard from acquaintances that he moved into another office. Smaller. Cheaper. That he has financial problems. Apparently he'd taken out loans counting on inheriting my property. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I never wanted to ruin him. I wanted him to understand. Understand that I am not a thing. Not a convenient old woman who hands out money and stays silent. I'm a person. A mother. A woman with dignity. Sometimes I miss him. Of course I do. I miss little Robbie who ran to me with scraped knees and cried into my shoulder. I miss the boy who promised he'd always stay by my side. But the grown Robert who said, "If my mother dies, let me know later," I do not miss. Because that man is a stranger. He is not my son. He is who he became. Did I defend my dignity? Yes. Standing. Though not on my knees. Did I lose my son? I don't know. Maybe he lost me. Many years ago. When he decided that my love was an endless resource he could take without giving anything back. And now let me give you some advice. If you own property, savings, anything of value, get your documents in order. Legally. Not just "it's yours someday, sweetheart," but on paper. Because life is unpredictable. People change. And sometimes protecting yourself isn't betrayal. It's survival. Write in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell so you don't miss new stories. Leave a like if you believe dignity matters more than blood ties. And your next story is already waiting on the screen. See you soon.